24 hours after the last time Donald Trump backed down on the same subject, his illegal tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico. Once again today, Donald Trump's boss told him what to do, and he did it. Donald Trump's boss is, of course, the stock market. The crashing stock market yesterday, in effect, ordered Donald Trump to drop his illegal and economically illiterate tariff scheme against Canada and Mexico. And so Donald Trump dropped the stupidest part of his stupid idea yesterday, the tariffs on American cars that are actually manufactured largely in the United States, but in the course of their manufacture, they cross the borders of Canada and Mexico more than once before that finished car or truck ends up in your local showroom here in the United States. Donald Trump's illegal and irrational tariff scheme would have added $20,000 to the price of a Dodge Ram pickup truck. It would be the single biggest inflationary act ever committed knowingly by a president of the United States, raising prices by 25%
Seven,
by a
and
Trump
we're the
edict.
first stop.
It is an order, in effect, to raise prices. The stock market rightly panicked over that prospect, which includes predictions not just of a Trump recession, but in the Wall Street Journal, predictions of a Great Depression caused by Donald Trump's tariffs. The misguided tariff scheme pushed into law 100 years ago by Republican Senator Smoot and Republican Congressman Hawley, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, were the proximate cause of America's Great Depression of the 1930s. Those tariffs were not President Herbert Hoover's idea, but he did sign them into law, and that went a long way to making him a one-term president driven out of office by the governor of New York, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who then led the country out of the Republican-created depression. With the stock market crashing again today, Donald Trump announced that what he lyingly called a pause of the implementation of some of his illegal tariffs against Canada and Mexico for 1 month, his standard pause period. That is the second month of pausing Donald Trump has done with his own disastrously bad idea. And when Donald Trump has an idea that he really believes in, like closing down all humanitarian assistance by the government of the United States anywhere in the world, he does it immediately. Take food out of the mouths of starving babies in the middle of a famine in Sudan. Donald Trump does that on the spot, no pause. Donald Trump has issued no pause in Elon Musk's complete destruction of the United States Agency for International Development, which, among other things, is the biggest feeder of starving babies in famine in the world. The biggest feeder of starving people of all ages in the world. There was no pause in what Elon Musk desperately wanted to do to those starving children, no pause at all. Because Donald Trump and Elon Musk firmly believe that we must never feed the starving children of the world, never. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk don't even have to think about it. And they know that the stock market doesn't care about starving babies in Sudan or anywhere else on the planet. And so we know just how much Donald Trump does not pause, never pauses when he confidently launches into a Trump idea, no matter how cruel, vicious, and unprecedented that idea is, like taking HIV medication away from people whose lives depend on that. Elon Musk and Donald Trump did that without hesitation, without pause. So when Donald Trump pauses for 30 days, that's Donald Trump publicly confessing, this is such a bad idea, even I can't do it. In the middle of a stock market crash today, Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary appeared in the city that houses the stock market, a city where a dozen eggs now cost $10, and he said, and I quote, "I'm not worried about inflation." After the first Trump presidency, I thought it was going to be difficult to find a Treasury Secretary more ill-suited to the job than Donald Trump's first Treasury Secretary. But he's done it. He's done it again. With inflation up, with Donald Trump threatening the most inflationary tariffs in history, and with eggs going over $10 a dozen in the city where he was speaking today, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, "I'm not worried about inflation." Imagine if Joe Biden's Treasury Secretary had ever said, under any circumstances, "I'm not worried about inflation," when eggs were half the price that they are today, and less than. Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary also said today in New York City, in a failed attempt to defend the Trump tariffs, quote, "Access to cheap goods is not the essence of the American dream." Again, imagine Joe Biden or any Biden administration official had ever said, "Low prices aren't a big deal. Who cares about low prices?" That's what Donald Trump's ultra-rich Treasury Secretary said today in New York City. Meanwhile, in the Oval Office, Donald Trump proved once again that no one has the power to humiliate Donald Trump quite like Donald Trump.
Have you been influenced, some of these exemptions that have been announced and some of these temporary delays, have you been influenced in those decisions because of the market reaction?
Well, there were no delays at all. No, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
I'm not even looking at the market. Donald Trump said that. Donald Trump, the president most obsessed with the stock market in presidential history, tells you the lie right to your face. I'm not even looking at the market. The market is Donald Trump's boss. If you watch the stock market during Donald Trump's tariff games, you know exactly what's going to happen next. Here's Donald Trump humiliating today's Donald Trump, who told the lie, "I'm not even looking at the market."
So I won the election. The markets went up thousands of points. Things started happening. You started doing things that you would have never, even though I didn't get sworn in until January 20th. But they refused to do that. And let me tell you, if for some reason I wouldn't have won the election, these markets would have crashed.
And here's Donald Trump 3 weeks ago, humiliating Donald Trump today.
I think the stock market's going to be great. In other words, we will rapidly grow our economy by dramatically shrinking the federal government, and we have to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't care about the market. In an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal, picked up on a point that I made here last night in some detail, that the Trump tariffs are, in fact, illegal. The Journal notes that Donald Trump is invoking the 1977 International Emergency Powers Act to justify his tariffs on Canada. But the Journal points out there is nothing happening with Canada that meets the legal definition of an emergency, and there is nothing in that law that specifically authorizes the president to impose tariffs in that kind of emergency. The Wall Street Journal notes, presidents have used the law to freeze assets of foreign governments and nationals, restrict U.S. companies from doing business with them, limit export of technologies, and ban imports from adversaries. In March 2022, President Biden used the law to ban imports of Russian energy, seafood, and alcoholic beverages, but notably not to impose tariffs. The Wall Street Journal editorial notes that the Trump tariffs against Canada could not survive a legal challenge. There is pre-existing law governing trade among the United States and Canada, United States and Mexico. It is the rewritten version of the North American Free Trade Agreement that Donald Trump himself and his team negotiated and signed with Prime Minister Trudeau during the first Trump presidency and with the President of Mexico, which Donald Trump then called the greatest trade deal in history.
For the first time in American history, we have replaced a disastrous trade deal that rewarded outsourcing with a truly fair and reciprocal trade deal that will keep jobs, wealth, and growth right here in America. And in a true sense, it's also a partnership with Mexico and Canada and ourselves against the world. It's really a trade partnership if you look at it that way. And it's a day of great celebration in all three countries.
So the president who claims to have negotiated the greatest trade deal in history, now believes that is a terrible trade deal. And he alone has decided to violate his own trade deal himself. Leading off our discussion tonight, it is an honor to be joined by Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Claude Ray. He's also the president of the Economic and Social Council for the 2025 session of the United Nations. Ambassador Ray, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good to be with you.
So, you negotiated a trade deal, a rewrite of the North of NAFTA. And by the way, that kind of trade deal should be rewritten every decade, couple of decades or so. Everybody understands that. It was a good time to do it. We knew a lot more about trade among these countries. And it really did seem to be an improvement. I thought it was an improvement. It should be an improvement. Now, the guy you negotiated with violates the trade deal he negotiated with you. What can you possibly do next with someone who behaves like that?
Well, first of all, we're a resilient people, we're a resilient country. So are the Mexicans. We're working with great determination. I think you had part of the Prime Minister's speech yesterday. It's a remarkable time. The Prime Minister is going to be stepping down soon from his post. There'll be a newly elected leader of the Liberal Party, which is the government in power at the moment, on Sunday. So this is really Prime Minister Trudeau's last period in office. And I think his speech yesterday, he showed enormous determination and clarity. And in a speech that he gave and was him speaking to the Canadian people and speaking directly to the president, he indicated that this approach that the president is taking is wrong. It is illegal, and it's also just wrong because it adds costs and prices to everybody in an economy on both sides of the border, in fact, all sides of the border, that has brought huge benefit to our country and to the United States. And it is possible to have a trade agreement that actually allows everyone to do better. And that's what we've discovered, and we've worked at it since the 1980s. So we are going to continue to work with the administration to try to figure out what is it about this agreement that he now finds so offensive, but also to understand that, this is the time for renegotiation is a year from now. 2026 is the statutory time, the time in law when we're supposed to renegotiate the agreement. And we are ready to sit down at any table and negotiate, but we do need to create some sense of certainty and fairness in terms of how we all treat each other. And that, I think, is what's been lost. The statements the president's made about the 51st state, the references to Mr. Trudeau as the governor of Canada, these are not a joke. They never were a joke for me. I always thought they were deeply offensive. And really strike at the heart of what it means to be a Canadian in this world. And I think a lot of people in Canada are stunned and then angry. And I think you're seeing that in the streets of Canada today. You're seeing a sense of deep frustration and deep anger. But I think the governments of Canada are going to continue to negotiate in good faith with the United States. And if it means going to a dispute settlement mechanism or to challenging the law in court, if that's what it takes, or we have to do that, that's of course something we can do. But I think above all, what we want to do is reach a fair and reasonable negotiation with the president and with his team. And that's something that we're still very willing to do.
My reading of the market yesterday, and reading of the market is always guessing.
Yeah, a little tricky. You get
to me, when things got really serious in the stock market, when Prime Minister Trudeau spoke, because the market hadn't heard from him. They knew the Trump game. They'd been through the Trump game before. They didn't believe Trump. They didn't believe Trump when he threatened the tariffs the first time around, and then he paused them, for a month. And they never expected him to impose these tariffs. They expected another pause. And then they went forward, and then they heard from Canada. And they heard a firmness from the Prime Minister that was clear and solid and strong and determined. And that's when the market said, oh, this is real. Canada's going to fight back, and Canada has very strong ammunition.
Well, I mean, first of all, it is the prime minister leading the country, but it's also all the premiers
Yes.
working at the provincial level. And we have a highly decentralized federal federation where the premiers, I was a premier once. And so there's a lot of power in the provinces to do stuff as well. And there's a lot of frustration, and it's shared not only geographically across the border of Canada, but it's shared across party lines. We have representatives of several different parties.
This has been
Lead
unifying.
province. This has been an incredibly, I wouldn't just say unifying, I would say galvanizing. This is something that is galvanizing our country with enormous determination. And so what the Prime Minister's announced is a series of steps. You do this, we'll do this. And that's painful to do because it hurts us as much as it hurts the people who are being affected. But more importantly, I think the issue for us now is how do we get this thing back on track? What is it that's really behind it? It doesn't seem to be the fentanyl because Canada's not a huge source of fentanyl. We all agree that we have to take steps to reinforce the border, and that's happening everywhere. And we understand the need to do that, and that's being done. So what is this really about? And it's the sense that this is such a moving target that the Prime Minister, I think he felt, well, we just have to do what we're going to do, and we have to get some clarity from the American government as to what is it going to take for you to understand that we don't accept this. And we have cars and integrated industries you've described. We have resources of all kinds. And we have manufacturing all across the country. And it will affect American customers. Potash, for example. We have farmers in the United States, in the Midwest. Planting season, I know it doesn't feel like it today, but planting season is coming. And when it comes, they're going to need a lot of potash. They're going to need a ton of potash. And we have it, and we supply it every year reliably and on good economic terms with no taxes and no tariffs. And the President of the United States is saying, well, there's going to be a tariff on that. And I think these are all things that don't make a lot of sense to us, but we're still good faith people. We want to be in a good partnership, and we value the partnership with the United States a great deal. I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and so I know this country pretty well, and I think what's happening is just not right. And I think there's a lot of Canadians who feel the same way and who feel very, very strongly that we've got to find a way to fix this. And we're ready 24 hours to pick up the phone anytime and just sit down and figure out what is it going to take to get us to a longer term negotiating table for 2026. But let's take the uncertainty out of everything. It's not just markets. The most important market is the job market, and it's jobs. It's jobs for people. It's prices for people. And it's these things that create enormous uncertainty and unfairness for citizens on both sides of the border. We should stop this, and we can stop it. We can stop it.
Trying to do hiring planning in environments like this cannot do it. They don't know what the conditions are going to be 30 days from now.
That's the situation with the 30 days, and the reason that even that is troublesome is because, and he knows this, the president knows this, he's an investor.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm positive. He's an investor. He's a smart investor.
He's ignorant of the law.
I'm not going to use those words, Lawrence.
I know you're not.
You're going to get me deeper into the mire than
I'm going to lean back here. Please proceed.
I just want to say that, you can't make an investment decision if you don't know what the tax regime is, you don't know what the tariff regime is. But you know what? The president knows that. And what troubles Canadians the most, I think, is it looks like what he's trying to do is really weaken our economy as much as he can and use economic force to weaken us. And we're not going to take that line down. We see that happening. We don't like it. We don't want it to happen. We don't want to be a 51st state. We want to remain an independent country. We're very proud to be Canadians. We think we have a lot to be proud of, both in our healthcare plans and the steps that we've taken to create a different kind of country north of the border that shares a lot of values and a lot of things with the United States, but still wants to be itself in the world. Just like you wanted to be yourself in the world in 1775. That's what we want. We want to do it without a revolution, and we want to do it without coming to any kind of conflict. We want to settle this in a peaceful way. but we're not gonna be taken advantage of. And there's a hockey expression we use, which is elbows up, elbows up. And there's a lot of that going on in Canada today. Elbows up, let's keep sharp here.
Elbows up. Ambassador Bob Ray, cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight. And please, make sure Canada knows, we here in the United States could not be more grateful for having the best possible neighboring country we could have to our country.
Well, frankly, we feel the same way. I mean, we have had such a great relationship over so many decades, and really ever since, wars ended and people figured out how to live together. We've been trading with each other, we've been marrying each other, we've been living with each other side by side, cheek by cheek. It's crazy for us to be having this fight, and we want to end it. But it does require, the moving target has to sit still for a while, and we have to find out how we can settle this thing, and I hope we can.
Ambassador Ray, thank you so much.
Thank you, great to be with you.
And coming up,